Good morning. I'm Yolanda McBride, the Director of Public Policy at Children's Aid. On behalf of the Fostering Youth Success Alliance, FYSA, I thank you for joining us this morning. Today's presentation is the second in a series of 4 webinars focused on understanding and addressing the priority needs of New York's foster youth in the aftermath of the COVID-19 health crisis. During each webinar, we will share findings from a pandemic impact survey of New York's older youth from foster care. We will also spotlight priorities and policy recommendations that address both pre- and post-pandemic issues of concern for young people with a foster care background across the state. Our goal is to improve stability and expand support to ensure every young person from foster care is ready to move forward in a positive direction. To give context to the survey finding, FYSA has prepared a report entitled Moving Forward, a Post-Pandemic Blueprint for New York's Foster Youth. The report link is in the chat. Bookmark this link as we will be adding new content to the report prior to each scheduled webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize the Children's Aid Office of Performance Management, the Council of Families and Child Caring Agencies, or CAFCA, and the Schuyler Center for Analysis and Advocacy for developing the New York State Foster Youth COVID-19 Impact Study. We especially want to acknowledge the 209 young people who responded to our survey. We know that so many foster youth showed tremendous courage and resilience during this challenging time. We also know that we have to do more to give each of them the stabilizing supports they need to survive and thrive. Finally, I'd like to thank the many FYSA partners and youth advocates who helped identify key housing priorities and recommendations, which we will share with you today. A bit of housekeeping. Everyone is in listen-only mode. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. I will say that again. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. We will monitor questions and address them at the end of this presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the FYSA website. So let's just do a little agenda review. Today, we are focusing on housing issues for New York's foster youth. As you will see, housing disruptions are incredibly stressful and often trigger other setbacks in a young person's life. This was true even before the pandemic, especially for those who have aged out or transitioned from foster care, and for those living in New York City and downstate regions. So let's look at our agenda. To start things off, I'll provide some background on FYSA, give you an overview of the Moving Forward report, and share study findings and youth reflections related to housing stability. Then we will discuss how we can address common housing challenges facing young people with a foster care background. We are fortunate to have a few issue experts joining us today who will share some recent updates related to the housing priorities and recommendations featured in the report. A little bit about FYSA. The Fostering Youth Success Alliance, or FYSA, launched in 2014. Housed at Children's Aid, FYSA promotes responsive policies and programs that offer young people with a foster care background every opportunity to set higher expectations and achieve their goals. We do this by collaborating and partnering with city, state, and federal agencies, advocates, and stakeholders directly impacted by the foster care system, including foster youth, parents, and caretakers to address system reform. We focus on policy and advocacy work on the socioeconomic issues that impact youth with a foster care background, including K-12 education, higher education, housing, and health. Our signature initiative is the Foster Youth College Success Initiative, or FYSA, which is administered by the New York State Education Department. To date, $34 million has been invested into the initiative. Since launching in 2015, FYSA has served over 2,000 students with a foster care background at 100 public and private colleges and universities in New York State. FYSA provides opportunities to support foster youth empowerment and the development of advocacy skills through several programs and events, as you see on the slide. Now, let's take a look at how the New York Foster Youth COVID-19 Impact Study was structured. We based our survey on a study conducted by Foster Club during the early stages of the pandemic in March 2020. We wanted to follow up about a year later to see how the public health crisis was affecting New York's older foster youth, including that just transitioned from the system. Our study questions were very similar to the national survey, with modifications to reflect the New York State context. Our targeted age group was 18 to 26. We distributed the survey through both upstate and downstate partners, and we were able to collect responses from 209 young people. Similar to the Foster Club study, we asked foster youth about issues and concerns related to living through a major public health crisis. Please refer to the study background section of the report for demographics and additional information about the survey respondents. The link is in the chat box. Let's take a look inside the report and how it's organized. Our 3 policy briefs feature more detailed survey findings and address specific and significant pre- and post-pandemic issues related to housing, education, healthcare for the state's foster youth. And as you will see on the table of contents, if you click on any of those buttons, you can get to the area that you're interested in. Each policy brief will be released as part of our Moving Forward webinar series. The schedule is listed here. All webinars will be recorded and available on the FYSA website. We encourage you to register for these sessions and share this information with your youth, staff, stakeholders, and colleagues. Now on to the housing policy brief. And a reminder to please use the Q&A box instead of the chat box to submit your questions. Housing instability and foster youth. Even before the pandemic hit, FYSA and other organizations were working to address housing gaps for older foster youth before they left care. National research shows a lack of reliable, affordable housing puts these young people at risk for homelessness and other adverse life outcomes. Let's look at the findings from the New York State Foster Youth COVID-19 Impact Study related to housing. What does it mean to be homebound when you don't have a home? As public health officials urged all New Yorkers to stay home to stop the spread of the coronavirus, nearly 25% of the survey respondents were facing or fearing housing instability. Of the foster youth identified as being most at risk for housing loss, 71% are living in college dorms or in their own residences. Who was most affected? Housing topped the list of priority concerns for 41% of survey respondents who identified as Black, Indigenous, and people of color from New York City, and also former foster youth living independently. The threat of housing disruption was 10% higher for young people that are no longer in foster care than for current foster youth. Sudden housing disruptions, such as college dorm closures that occurred during the pandemic, elevate the risk of homelessness for displaced youth. As often happens when they don't have family to fall back on, some students are forced to resort to couch surfing with friends, while others end up in emergency shelters or living on the streets as they search for better options. A temporary housing crisis can have a lasting negative impact on youth from care in several ways. For example, college-enrolled students may struggle to stay in school if they have to devote most of their time and attention toward resolving unstable living situations. As a consequence, students from foster care sometimes suffer significant educational and financial setbacks by pausing their studies, delaying their return to school, or dropping out entirely. These life disruptions are incredibly stressful for young adults and can limit future employment opportunities and earn potential for years to come. What is your living situation? These are direct quotes and comments from young people who responded to the survey. I'm staying with a friend, basically homeless. Currently, I'm living from couch to couch. I was in college until I couldn't stay on campus anymore. I live in a foster home, and I'm currently struggling to get supportive housing. These are some additional comments. I might have to move out because I'm currently pregnant. I live in NYCHA. My crib is horrible. However, I have a roof over my head. I was relocated due to the COVID-19 outbreak. I currently reside with my relatives temporarily. I'm in a shelter in Manhattan. I was kicked out by my mom in North Carolina. Now let's review the housing policy recommendations and priorities from Moving Forward Blueprint. A reminder that you can read the executive summary and the housing section of the report now in the link in the chat box. As I read some of these recommendations and policy priorities, I will also call upon our experts to expound upon some of the recommendations and policy priorities listed here. So our first recommendation is around improving and increasing direct assistance to help former foster youth maintain secure, varied housing options in New York City. Work with the New York City Authority, NYCHA, to eliminate access barriers, minimize wait times, and improve communication to applicants from foster care, avoid unnecessary discharges. Form a youth and care housing work group to encourage collaborative problem solving on behalf of young people with a foster care background. Develop a youth-friendly housing guide that would combine information from several agencies from across the state, including a directory of all brokers and landlords, except Section 8 housing, choice vouchers, and rental subsidies. The second overarching recommendation is around expanding access to subsidies for all New York State youth with a foster care background. Grant designation for Section 8 housing choice vouchers, and support 148 local law, which will give youth with the foster care priority access to city FEPS, a rental assistance voucher administered by the New York City Department of Social Services. We actually have with us this morning Nicole Hunt, Legislative Director for City Council Member Steve Levin, and she will provide more background on Intro 148. Nicole?
Hello, thank you so much for letting me speak on this bill and for all the work that all of you do. So yes, Intro 148 is our bill that the council member is very excited about. We are to allow young people aging out of foster care to count their time as foster care as time in shelter for the purposes of being eligible for a city FHEPS voucher immediately without having to enter the adult shelter system, which is currently the way that happens. So, and then additionally, there is a pilot that ACS is doing currently that just started this year. I don't actually know if those vouchers have been issued yet, but they have been working on sort of the procedure and the MOU they have 50 vouchers to sort of get this process started. So we still are moving forward with our bill because we think that it's important to codify it and make sure it carries on to future administrations, and then also to expand it so it's not a limited number, it's as many as are necessary. But it is what we're seeing so far with the voucher is that it's really great that the ACS can do this directly. They don't have to go through sort of the bureaucracy of the DHS system to get young people these vouchers, which because of another bill we just got passed, Intro 146, the vouchers will be at fair market rate or at Section 8 value. So will be that much more useful in finding suitable apartments. So that's it. It's a very straightforward bill. it very much just says time and care is equal to time and shelter. That's it. We try not to complicate it too much, so it'd be easily enforceable and sort of easy to advocate for on our end. And we're excited to, it's already had a hearing. I'm just looking that up. Yes, it's already had a hearing. And so we're really just looking to get this passed by the end of the year. Any questions that folks might have for me about the bill? I'm happy to talk about it.
Thank you, Nicole. If you can please put your questions in the Q&A box. Nicole can answer the questions there. Thank you. The next recommendation we have is around connecting youth from foster care to the Foster Youth to Independence FYI program, federal support available from Housing and Urban Development, HUD, seek more federal funding to expand the FYI housing vouchers in New York. And then also expand federal rapid rehousing programs that include supportive housing services for youth in care across the state. And to talk a little bit more about the rapid rehousing program, we have Amy Wilkinson, who is the Vice President of After School and Youth Services from Sheltering Arms. Amy?
Good morning, everyone. So I just want to talk a little bit about rapid rehousing. And, you know, as Yolanda stated, rapid rehousing is a federally funded program through HUD. And the main goal of the program is to get youth that are experiencing homelessness stably housed and permanently housed for the long run. And what we do is we take young people, we put them in apartments with leases in their own name, and we give them rental assistance, right, for up to 2 years. And in addition to that, we provide them with wraparound support services. So they'll get case management, they'll get mental health services, they'll get youth peer navigators that will help them to navigate, you know, living in an apartment for the first time, you know, how to talk to their landlord, how to pay their rent, you know, what happens if, you know, I have work issues, you know, and having a peer to be able that has experienced that and went through that process themselves, you know, as they're navigating their tour guide to kind of help them to coach them through some of those difficult times. So in providing that assistance to the youth is extremely successful. One of the things with the homeless youth population is we see a lot of young people that have come out of foster care and end up homeless and end up in this rapid rehousing program. And the good thing about it is it gives young people the option to be independent and, you know, to put them in the least restrictive setting up front, and really saying that if I give you your own permanent apartment with lease in your own name, everything else that's going on in your life will fall into place. The young people don't have to have jobs. They don't have to have stable mental health histories. They don't have to be substance free, right? All they need to be is a young person in need of a home. And once they get into the apartment, that's a stabilizing factor that will help improve their mental health, that will help improve their employment. We've had so many young people go through our program that said that just being able to know that they have a safe, stable, permanent place to come home every night has had a tremendous impact on their trajectory. It made them more able to go to mental health counseling. It made them more capable of getting up and going to work every day. We at Sheltering Arms also run 2 drop-in centers for homeless youth, which we also see a lot of young people that come out of foster care in there as well. And one of the things that we noticed and take note of is that most of the young people are working while couch surfing, working while staying in drop-in centers in the evening time, and they have to wake up at, guys, wake me up at 5 in the morning. I got to be at work at 7, you know, and they're still working through this difficult time. So imagine the impact that putting them in an apartment so they don't have to worry about where I'm going to sleep every night, you know, what kind of difference that makes. And for our young people exiting foster care, we really believe that rapid rehousing should be a direct line option for them. Where we can, you know, adjust some of the rules and some of the regulations and stipulations around how young people enter into rapid rehousing so that youth are able to go directly from foster care into this setting. It is a tremendously successful intervention. It has been researched and studied around the country. and around the world that this is a very successful way to stabilize people's housing and prevent them from becoming homeless in the future. And we know with the high risk that our young people coming out of foster care experience for becoming homeless, this is something that they really need. So we're one out of only 5 organizations in the whole New York City that provide rapid rehousing to young adults. We're looking for more people to be involved, and we're also looking for more people to get on board with lowering some of the requirements for who can come into this program, so we can make young people come directly from foster care into rapid rehousing. So I don't know if anyone has questions about that. Be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Amy. If you can put your questions in the Q&A box, we will answer all the questions live at the end of the recommendations. To continue with recommendations and policy priorities focused on housing subsidies, explore opportunities for statewide replication of effective supportive housing models for college students from foster care, such as the CUNY Dorm Project. Advocate for priority or automatic Section 8 housing choice vouchers for CUNY Dorm Project students to ensure they have stable housing once they graduate college or leave the program reasons. Support the passing of A 2476 and S 5419, which would increase the New York State housing subsidy from $300 to $600 per month for older youth in care and eligible foster families. And to talk about the status of those bills, the state housing subsidy, we have Julia Davis, the Director of Youth Justice and Child Welfare from the Children's Defense Fund, New York, and also a member of the New York State Child Welfare Coalition. Julia.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. And thank you, Nicole and Amy, for helping us to see all of the different sort of patchwork of programs and the needs at a federal, state, and city level to address the complexity around housing for young people leaving foster care. And I especially want to thank all of the young people that participated in this study. This research is really essential. And while it tells us many things that we already know about the foster care system and about young people, it really contributes to what we know about the urgency now. I want to talk a little bit about this long time subsidy that we've had in New York State, which is a child welfare subsidy for housing. It was created in 1988. It was established as part of statewide preventive services that are available in every local Department of Social Services, including in New York City through ACS. The idea was that we need to stabilize housing for young people leaving foster care, as well as for families who may be in contact with the child welfare system, with either an open case and investigation, receiving preventive services, or bringing their young people home, returning to their families. Unfortunately, the program hasn't changed since 1988. It was established as a $300 per month maximum financial contribution that could be available for 36 months. And as we all know, as folks living in New York, especially those of us downstate, $300 really doesn't make an enormous dent in housing. So the bill that was introduced a few years ago and that will be introduced again this year would increase that available funding by doubling it, making it $600 per month available for up to 36 months to young people leaving foster care, 18 to 21, as well as families who are having their children return home or have an open case. And, you know, this is really more urgent than ever before. And I think that was reflected in the legislative session this year. The bill was championed by Assembly Member and Chair of Children and Families on the Assembly side, Assembly Member Hevesi, and on the Senate side, Senator Brisbort. It passed the Senate this year, which is the furthest that the bill has gone since it's been introduced. And I think that reflects two things. One, the research that FYSA has introduced and shared with us today, the urgency for young people who have been surviving through this plague, who have been enduring with enormous resilience the pressures that the COVID crisis has brought to us. And I think the other sort of important context here is that we have seen investments in foster age youth leaving foster care from the federal government and from the state this year. There's been a real recognition that young people need cash assistance and other supports to endure this tumultuous time, but those things are not permanent. And we know that both the child welfare and the rent protections that have been available under COVID are likely to not continue to exist moving forward. They will wind down. And so this is really a critical moment to pass legislation that would increase this benefit, codify it, make it permanent for young people and families statewide. So the New York State Child Welfare Coalition is going to continue to advocate for this bill. I urge all of you to join us in that work. If you have questions about the program or about the legislation or the advocacy, I welcome them, both at the Children's Defense Fund and as part of the coalition. So Yolanda, thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Julia. We also wanted to share that we have some, the last page of the housing brief really features some housing resources for foster youth. You can click on each listing to get more information. This list is a living document, so if there are additional resources that might be helpful to youth in care, we invite you to please send them to us at FYSA@children'saidnyc.org. Next, I would like to call on Danielle DiLorenzo, the Residential Area Director for the Bridge New York, to talk about supportive housing resources for foster youth.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm actually learning a lot from my fellow panelists. Thank you for the information. So supportive housing for POPC really became popular, and when I say POPC, I mean young adults 18 to 24 aging out of foster care. Really became popular about 6-7 years ago within the supportive housing field. So first is if you are a housing agency or a foster care agency, and you have clients or youth that need housing, the first thing you need to make sure is that your agency is connected with the HRA 2010E housing application system, now known as CAPS. There are various definitions and eligibilities requirements to get supportive housing within NYC, and that is the gateway. So if you do not have access to that portal, please make sure that you get access. It's truly important. The Bridge, we have 2 specific programs that deal with young adults aging out of foster care. One is a licensed housing facility that is a little bit more restrictive. And then we also have one that is supported, which really just feels like a regular apartment building that happens to have social services on site. So the eligibilities you need for those programs are POPC specifically. That definition is specifically for 18 to 24 aging out of foster care. With the 2 different housing models, the more restrictive is they meet with a case manager once a week. They do apartment inspections. We do have supervised medication windows in the event someone is prescribed medication, and it's really the starting point. So if a client needs assistance learning how to, obtain really good ADL skills, sometimes they don't know how to clean their kitchen, right? They're coming out of foster care, so they don't know the proper tools to use. They need to learn, not to mix bleach and ammonia, right? So that's the starting point. That's why we meet every week, to give them those skills, give them budgeting skills, show them how to advocate for themselves, and give them the opportunity to be independent as much as possible as we can in that setting. From there, we would do an HRA 2010E, even at that level, to get them into the next step, which is the supportive housing model. And there, the case managers will see them once a month. They will do service planning that is client-centered. And we would, again, address skills that they need to work on, but it probably wouldn't be as intense as the licensed housing part. We have made really good connections with other youth services in the area, which I will put in the chat. We are constantly looking for POPC approved youth to be in our programs. We've done a really great job rotating people out into full independent housing settings, which is amazing. And it's really great to see how resilient the youth are going through all those steps of supportive housing. And they have such amazing stories, and it's really enlightening to work with them. So if you do not have access to the CAP system, please get it. For those youth that are not POP C approved, but are POP A. POP A is adults 18 and older who have a homeless history. So if unfortunately a youth is in the shelter system, that would more than likely be the eligibility they get approved for. And even with that, our supportive housing sites and our portfolio within the bridge has a number of POP A beds available at any given moment. So just because they are in the shelter system, and although that is unfortunate, there is still light at the end of the tunnel. If they want to advocate for themselves, which I think is fantastic, they could reach out to CUCS. It's written there on the slide. CUCS could hand out a list of all supportive housing providers within the area, numbers to call, intake departments, so that they could advocate for themselves to get their housing package to those agencies and potentially be eligible for any vacancies within those agencies. Usually all the agencies have a centralized intake department. I will be typing in the chat the Bridges intake department and where to send packages. And from there, usually the intake department does an initial assessment. If we have a vacancy, they will send it to the program director that has that vacancy. We will do a walkthrough and a tour. And then from there, we will accept the person more than likely, right? Because the number one goal is to get someone housed, right? We're a housing first agency. And from there, if for some reason we don't have any vacancies available for that specific person, we will place them on our wait list until we do. And we always call back anybody that is eligible for any vacancies within our programs. Again, I will write down a whole bunch of resources in the chat. And a little bit outside of supportive housing, if your youth is connected with ACS, please reach out to Paul Williams and Renette Short. They're really great at connecting them to NYCHA and Section 8 housing.
Thank you so much, Danielle. While we get ready to answer your questions, we ask you to please help us by evaluating today's presentation. We ask you to please complete the poll that I just launched. Completing the poll will really help us to ensure that the next webinars that we have coming up are organized in the best way. Thank you. And if you're finished submitting your answers to the poll, we also ask that you please put any remaining questions in the Q&A box, because we will begin to take questions live shortly. You'll give it a couple more minutes before we get started with the questions. Stop the poll. Okay, thank you very much for sharing the results real quickly. Okay, now we are ready for the Q&A. And while I think people are still putting questions in the Q&A chat, I will actually hand it over to Michelle Avila, who is Assistant Director of Public Policy at Children's Aid, who will read the questions aloud and engage the panelists that we have for this morning's webinar.
Thank you. So we have a question for Nicole from Michael. How optimistic are you about the bill passing this year?
Hello, thank you for that question. I am optimistic. I think that the council member Levin is the chair of the General Welfare Committee, which oversees ACS and DHS. and is, as I said, the bill has already had a hearing. The advocates are supportive of it. ACS is very pleased with the pilot and how that's going. So I don't anticipate a whole lot of pushback. I think in this case, maybe I'm missing something, but the idea of allowing youth aging out of foster care to get their vouchers immediately without having to initially enter an adult shelter, just I don't know how you really fight that hard against that, honestly. but we didn't get a strong opposition at the hearing, which is usually when the administration or the agencies would express any issues that they might have with it. And then with the pilot, we already have an idea of how implementation would work. So I don't anticipate a lot of issue getting it passed.
Thank you, Nicole. We have another question up for Amy on the rapid rehousing program. How successful is the rapid rehousing program? Are there specific locations for the program? And how do youth apply for the program?
Hi. So for rapid rehousing, this is an intervention that's not only used for youth, but it's also used for adults, families. It actually started the rapid rehousing with veterans, is the first population that they tried it out with, because veterans were coming home from deployment and were finding themselves homeless, and they wanted to figure a way to get them into their own permanent apartment as quickly as possible. So there's been a lot of research that's been done on rapid rehousing. Now, to say specifically on youth is not as much, because this is more of a newer population that this is being applied to. But in general, most organizations and most studies and research that's been conducted report a 70% success rate for rapid rehousing. For us personally, we've had 100% success rate since we've started. Every young person that has entered into the program has been able to remain in their own apartment and continue to be stably housed. Or we had a few situations where young people chose other options. We had a young man that, after he got into rapid rehousing, he got 3 jobs, and he started making a whole lot of money, and he decided he wanted to live in Manhattan. So he moved to Manhattan and got a really nice apartment in Manhattan. And we had, another that went into the military. That was his life goal, and he felt that being in rapid rehousing really helped him to actualize that life goal of going into the military. He said because he was a young person who grew up in foster care, because he had spent so much time unstable from the moment he left foster care, that he didn't have the opportunity to really apply himself to the things that he really wanted to do. So he was able to, roll into the military. He went into basic training. He was able to do all of those things because he was able to sit still, be stable, have his own apartment, to actualize his own dreams, and move into the military, which was his life goal. So it's been very successful for us, and it's been very successful for us in New York City working with youth. It's a newer area. Like I said, we'll probably see more studies coming out on how successful it's been for youth. But preliminary research has given same numbers as the adult population, slightly higher than the 70%, somewhere like in the 75, 76% range of successfulness. Now, if you want to refer youth, there's only 5 organizations that do it, but if you want to refer youth, you can always refer to youth to us at Sheltering Arms. And if we're unable to, we don't have space or capacity, we'll surely pass that referral to one of our partner organizations that also do rapid rehousing in New York City. So, you can just email rapidrehousing at shelteringarmsny.org. And I could add it in the chat as well, so that way people have that. And once you do that, it's just like a 1-page application that asks a few questions, and then we'll start working with the young person directly from there. It's a very low barrier process to get the services. There's, you don't have to have a job. You don't have to have any prerequisites to be in the program, besides the fact of needing a stable place to live.
Thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate that. We have another question. for any panelists that would like to answer it. Is there a way to talk with people about being a foster youth in college, like a support group to share experiences and make friends? Because it is difficult.
Actually, I can take that question, Imani. We can definitely connect you to some support groups. If you can reach out to us at FYSA at children'saidnyc.org. What we will do is just get some more information from you in terms of which college you're attending, and we can connect you to services through there or through our partnering agencies, depending on where you live. We can definitely support you in that.
Thank you, Yolanda. The next question is, are there mental health counseling or supports known specifically for foster youth that can be accessed to college students now?
I will also take that. Yes, I saw that question, Imani, and when we connect, we will talk about all those resources that you have asked about. Absolutely.
Thank you, Yolanda. Is there specific supportive housing programs for youth not in ACS custody? This is specific for all of the counties outside of ACS.
I can start. This is Julie from the Children's Defense Fund. So, housing for young people leaving foster care who aren't in ACS custody, but might have been in the custody of a local Department of Social Services in one of the other counties, as well as young people just in this age group who may not be leaving custody, are really sort of at the intersection of a lot of different programs. There are supportive programs that are available sort of through the child welfare system that are supportive independent living programs that may combine sort of residential supports and sort of transition to independence. There are also OPWDD, Office of People with Developmental Disabilities programs that are really more for the upper end of that, the young adults entering, sort of re-entering or leaving foster care. And then there's the runaway and homeless youth programs that sort of overlap with this population and serve many young people leaving care. And so, it really is in many ways a community by community inquiry about what young people have access to in different parts of the state. And predictably, it looks really different for young people navigating these systems in different parts of the state. I think, just to follow on one point, I think this is why a statewide increase in the subsidy available for young people to pay for private, for lack of a better word, housing, to be able to use that money to go and either live with roommates or live on their own is so critical, because this patchwork is really different in different parts of the state. So Michelle, I'll
Thank you, Julia. Does any other panelists want to chime in? Okay, thank you. We have a similar question that says, these are wonderful programs, but seem to center in New York City. What resources are available to foster youth in upstate New York?
And so my answer is the same, that there are different programs in different parts of the state. There are supportive independent living programs, runaway homeless youth, and OPWDD programs in all different parts of the state. And if you're looking to find out sort of what the resources are available for your young people in your community, starting with your local Department of Social Services to get a sense for that is one way to start. Another is reaching out to the Office of Children and Family Services at the state level.
Thanks again.
And also what we can do is we can get the links to those specific programs and also add them to the housing resource site and those out.
Thank you, Yolanda. I think this is a question for Danielle. Can you reiterate what POP C and POP A is?
Sure. So like I said, the HRA 2010E, they have a number of different definitions or eligibilities that you could be approved for. The two are Pop C and Pop A. Pop C is for young adults 18 to 24 that have history of foster care with potentially mental health diagnosis, some behavioral issues. For Pop A, it's anybody, any adult over 18 years that is currently homeless or has a history of homelessness with a mental health diagnosis.
Thanks, Danielle. And we have another question. Can you lose your housing in Pop C?
So if you are in a supportive housing site, so a single site or scattered site, you have your own lease. The only way that you would lose your housing is if you are evicted or if you potentially need additional resources and additional services. We would talk to you and create a service plan module to get you to maybe a different type of housing or a different type of level of housing that will provide more wraparound services. But you do have your own lease, and we do have to go through housing court if you violate that lease.
Thanks so much, Danielle. And we have a question. Will rapid housing support upstate New York transitioning foster youth?
Yes, it's not city specific. So it's definitely possible to help young people from upstate.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. We have a more general question. Will you share some of the slide notes with legislators? Yolanda.
Yes, absolutely. We're sharing, this is again being recorded, so we will upload the webinar, but the slides and the notes as well. And the report that we actually went through in terms of the findings and the recommendations, that is actually already up, and anyone can view that right now. And what we will do is put the link again to the ReadyMag, to the report up again in the chat.
Thanks, Yolanda. We have a question from someone that's looking for permanent housing, such as affordable housing with or without a city FEPS voucher. There are panelists that can share a resource.
So if you are working, there is Housing Connect that you could go to. It's an online website that has all newly developed housing providers or housing buildings coming online that have low-income housing. If you meet the income requirements and submit all the required documentation, you may be eligible for that type of housing.
I was just going to say the same thing. Housing Connect is how our office helps people find affordable housing. It also often how you can find landlords who will accept the voucher. I know that this is sort of, I don't know if this is done yet, but that the Street Easy website is also looking to establish a way to connect people with vouchers to landlords who accept them. So that's something that sort of we've been talking to them about, and like is in the works on that too. But Housing Connect is a great program. As she said, you put in all your information and then it comes to you with apartments that you're eligible for, and is sort of an ongoing, like as new apartments come online, you get to see them.
I want to just state that in New York City is like one of the most difficult cities, I guess, like us in like LA, to find affordable housing, and I hear the question and it's like, I want affordable housing, and it's just really, really so hard to do, especially without a voucher, because a lot of the affordable housing landlords that have affordable housing or developers of affordable housing, they have like homelessness mandates for the people that they put in those units. It's like they have to put a certain percentage have to be homeless, and it's like all of these different things. So it is a hard thing to get into. So I don't want you to feel discouraged, whoever asked that question, about, you know, finding affordable housing, because it's not an easy process and it will take time. But if you do go through Housing Connect, that is your best bet. If you don't have like some sort of housing specialist tour guide. Now, I want to suggest utilizing one of New York City's drop-in centers for youth that is funded by DYCD. The drop-in centers have, we will have in one more month, housing navigators that would be able to really help sit down and work with young people one-on-one to connect them to the resources that they're most eligible for, is the best way to say it, and also help people get vouchers if they need them by applying for those vouchers. So the drop-in centers is definitely something that's always there for young people to connect with if they need resources, help, or support, because navigating the housing system on your own is a very, very tough thing to do.
Thank you, Amy. So we have a question from Kirsten DiCanio. These programs seem like a great resource for foster kids in New York City, but what about those that are in need of resources in upstate New York?
I can actually take that question. We actually have received a couple of questions in terms of, or responses around what is available for young people upstate New York. And we are currently collecting that information. The programs that are being lifted up right now, there are similar programs across the state. And what we need to do, and what we will do, is identify those providers and collect that information, and also get that out to individuals. Because there are programs that are supportive of young people in terms of getting them the housing upstate. It's just identifying the providers and getting that into your hands. And so we will commit to pulling that information together and getting that out to those that are on this webinar.
Thanks, Yolanda. Another question, is there a guide for all of these supportive housing programs?
That's another good question. That was actually something interesting when we were having conversations with our housing working group and with young people that were talking about housing. One of the things that they talked about is that the resources that are not in one place, and they are not in a youth-friendly guide or informational online system or something like that. And so one of the things that some of the youth have talked about is wanting to do that, is to create a youth-friendly guide that has all of the housing support information in one place that is easily accessible and also easily understandable, because sometimes this information can get really complicated, particularly for a young person that has aged out of care and they are looking for resources and support. And so that is something that the youth advocates that are working with FYSA wanted to do and have committed to doing. And so it will take some time, but that is something that we are working on, putting that information all in one place, and to also put in place a process to allow for that information to be updated on a consistent basis, because we all know that what happens is the information that we have about what's happening currently may change. And so not just putting together the information, but making sure that it stays updated.
Thank you, Yolanda. I wanted to share a comment from Nadija, who said, we also have the Salvation Army Residential Services and the Rescue Mission Upstate New York. Upstate Youth Service Directory, www.ongov.net. These are a couple of upstate drop-in centers. She's unsure if they currently have the voucher system. Their youths deal with more DSS. Thanks so much for that information, Nadija. And if you could please put that information in the chat, and it'll get to all participants. We do have two questions, it seems, from youth. One question is, what vouchers are available at the moment? And the other question is, where can I get a voucher to show that I am in foster care aging out?
I can try to answer that question as far as the city FHEPS vouchers. Currently, this pilot program excluded is only available to people who have been in the DHS shelter system. So that is what the bill that we're proposing would try to eliminate, would allow it to be available directly to youth aging out of the foster care system. But that doesn't really currently exist except for this small pilot program. Did that answer that question? Or is there more information on this?
I want to also say that they have the FUP vouchers, which are also available specifically to youth aging out of care. This is something that we've been able to get a lot of our young people approved for. And it's basically a Section 8 voucher that's good for 3 years. And after 3 years, it's portable and convertible into a full Section 8 voucher. FUP vouchers, you can typically apply through ACS directly. If you're connected to like the older youth division of ACS, or if you want, you can always utilize our drop-in center or one of the other borough-based drop-in centers, and we can help young people apply for that. Our drop-in center is located in Jamaica. I popped in the chat the link to all of the drop-in centers. You should just look for Sheltering Arms, either of ours. We have one in Jamaica, one in Far Rockaway. We could help connect young people to that. But we also have the emergency housing vouchers, which is just being released right now, which young people aging out of foster care should be able to tap into some of those as well. It's an exciting time, I think, for housing in general. There's a lot more options that are coming down the pipeline.
Thank you, Amy, for that information. We wanted to wrap up because we're coming to a close, and the questions that we have not answered in the chat, we will definitely answer those. So please, if you have additional questions, reach out to us at FYSA@children'saidnyc.org, and we will get back to you in terms of answering your questions. A reminder that we do have upcoming webinars, and we are asking you to please save those dates. You can also register for those webinars on the FYSA website, and that will be added to the chat. Just thanking everyone for attending today's presentation. Again, a recording of this webinar will be uploaded to the FYSA website for future reference. We had a lot of questions about resources, wanting to know more about resources for upstate youth. And again, we are committed to capturing all that information and putting it together, and we will get that information out to those that request it, particularly the legislative offices that reached out directly to us, and to everyone that signed up for this webinar. That information will be posted on our website, and we will notify you when we have that information pulled together and uploaded. Again, we encourage you to register for the upcoming webinars and read the full post-pandemic blueprint to support the young people from foster care across the state. We really thank you again for joining us today. We thank our speakers that joined us to answer some of your questions, and have a really great day and rest of the week. Thank you, everyone.